Okay, so June 25th, 2009. The world, it just stopped, didn't it?
Yeah.
News broke that Michael Jackson, the king of pop, he died.
It felt completely impossible for so many people.
Totally. And it sparked this just global outpouring of grief, but also immediately a flood of questions.
Right, what really happened?
Exactly. What were the actual circumstances? What did the investigations find out? And just how did the world react to losing someone that huge?
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together a whole stack of sources, official reports, journalistic accounts, public reactions, even the different theories that popped up. And the idea is to really unpack the key bits of information, the insights around this incredibly impactful event. We're going to explore some surprising facts and, well, the really complex story of his final days.
And what's so fascinating here, I think, is how one person's life and death can just intersect with so many parts of society.
Like what specifically?
Wait, you've got medical ethics, the legal system, how the media behaves, and just, that raw collective human emotion.
Yeah.
So this deep dive, it helps us understand not just what happened, but maybe the bigger implications for how we process these massive events in today's hyper-connected world.
Okay, so to really get a handle on that massive reaction, we probably need to start at the end, right? We'll walk through those critical hours leading up to June 25th.
Makes sense.
So Michael Jackson was 50. He was in the middle of this intense preparation for the This Is It comeback concerts. Huge deal. They were starting in London just a few weeks later, in July.
Incredible pressure, you have to imagine.
Totally. And the night before, June 24th, he'd apparently rehearsed past midnight. Someone who was there, Ed Alonzo, a magician, said he looked great and had great energy. He gets home around 12:30 a.m. on the 25th, goes to bed about an hour later. Now, the key thing here, and it's well documented, is his long struggle with insomnia.
Right, and using medication to deal with it.
Exactly. And his personal doctor, Conrad Murray, was there specifically to help him sleep that night. And what happened over those next few hours, it's tragic. Murray gave him various drugs, diazepam, lorazepam, midazolam.
A cocktail of sedatives.
Yeah. But Jackson still couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
And he kept asking for milk. That was his nickname for Propofol.
Which is just startling.
Yeah.
Propofol, it's a powerful surgical anesthetic.
Not a sleep aid, but apparently he'd used it before for sleep. So at 10:40 a.m., Murray injects him with 25 milligrams of Propofol mixed with lidocaine. Then Murray testified he left the room for just 2 minutes to use the bathroom. Comes back, finds Jackson isn't breathing, weak pulse.
And right there, those few minutes and what happened next, that became absolutely critical, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Murray's actions, or, maybe inactions, they were central to the whole investigation. We're talking about things like his CPR technique.
Right, trying it on the bed, not a hard surgery.
Exactly, using one hand. And then the really controversial delay in calling 911, he cited things like no landline, not knowing the address.
Which sounds odd in that situation.
It does, and it's just striking how every single tiny detail, every second, got put under this massive microscope because it was Michael Jackson.
And those details, they just kept piling up, didn't they? Murray admitted later he'd made several private calls on his cell phone after finding Jackson unresponsive.
Calls he didn't initially tell law enforcement about.
Right. It wasn't until 12:21 p.m. that 911 was actually called. And it was a security guard who made the call. That's almost, an hour and a half after Jackson was apparently found not breathing.
A huge gap in time.
Paramedics get there super fast, 12:26 p.m. They find him, not breathing, no pulse. They try CPR there for 42 minutes.
Wow.
Then transported to UCLA Medical Center. He arrives at 1:14 p.m. and then pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. Just did it.
Yeah, shocking end.
So the aftermath was immediate, intense. The world wanted answers, demanded them really.
Understandably.
And the investigation kicked off fast. A 3-hour autopsy happened the very next day, June 26th. The Jackson family also arranged for their own private second autopsy.
Which is not uncommon in high-profile cases.
Right. Initially, reports said no obvious signs of trauma, no foul play. But then, August 28th, 2009, that's when the official word came down.
The bombshell.
Yeah. The LA County Medical Examiner classified his death as a homicide. The cause: acute propofol intoxication.
Primarily propofol.
Yep, but made worse by lorazepam, and then less significantly, midazolam, diazepam, lidocaine, ephedrine, that whole cocktail. The full toxicology report, though, that was kept private for a while at the police's request.
Now, something that often gets kind of lost in the shuffle, but it's really important, is what the coroner found about his general health.
What was that?
Surprisingly, he was found to be otherwise healthy for a man his age. Strong heart, normal major organs, no significant atherosclerosis, just a little clack in his leg arteries. His weight was fine.
So not someone on the verge of collapse from general ill health.
Exactly. He did have chronically inflamed lungs, but the report said that didn't contribute to his death. This finding really reframes things, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, it shifts the narrative. It wasn't necessarily this inevitable decline of a frail person. It points much more directly to a specific catastrophic event caused by the drugs administered.
Right. It underscores the lethal role of that propofol combination, even in someone relatively healthy.
Precisely.
And that reframing definitely put the focus squarely on those substances. The LAPD and the DEA, they teamed up on the investigation. DEA was tracing the prescription drugs. There was some chatter early on about maybe the LAPD didn't secure the house properly at first, but the police insisted they followed protocol.
Okay.
Investigators found propofol, other drugs in the house. Some had weird labels, some no labels at all. And then you had former associates like Mark Schaffel coming forward alleging past use. Propofol, Xanax, Zoloft.
Right, adding to the picture of substance use over time.
Yeah, other drugs were mentioned too. Painkillers like hydrocodone, hydromorphone, antidepressants like paroxetine. But the key was the mix found in his system at the time of death.
And the absolute center of that was propofol, the milk of amnesia, they call it.
Because it looks milky, right?
Yeah, that opaque white liquid.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful IV anesthetic, meant for hospitals under constant monitoring.
Not for insomnia in a bedroom.
Definitely not. And we learned that Jackson had apparently asked his nurse, Sherilyn Lee, for it back in May. She refused, warned him how dangerous it was.
Wow.
She even suspected later he might have gotten it elsewhere based on a phone call describing his symptoms. And maybe even more telling, his dermatologist, Arnold Klein, said an anesthesiologist gave Jackson propofol in a hotel room way back during the history tour in 96-97.
So, not a completely new thing for him seeking it out.
It seems not, which just adds another layer of tragedy to it all.
Okay, so you have the homicide ruling, the focus on propofol. The spotlight turns, inevitably and intensely, on to Dr. Conrad Murray.
The personal physician.
Right. And this leads to that huge criminal trial everyone watched. Murray, a cardiologist, he'd only joined Jackson's team in May 2009, hired as part of the deal with AG Live, the concert promoter for This Is It.
There was some back and forth about who exactly hired him, wasn't there?
Yeah, AEG said Jackson insisted on him. But then in the trial, it came out that AEG was technically employing Murray, and Jackson hadn't actually signed the contract yet. Bit murky.
But Jackson was paying him, right, a lot.
Oh yeah, $150,000 a month, huge salary.
And almost immediately after Jackson's death, you started hearing concerns about Murray's actions. Jesse Jackson, a family friend, said something about Murray having left the scene.
Referring to that period right after finding Jackson?
Yeah, that perceived delay, the lack of immediate action. Law enforcement certainly grew suspicious quickly. They searched his office, his home.
And confirmed he gave the propofol.
Confirmed he administered propofol within 24 hours of death, so the focus really narrowed onto him.
Absolutely. And the legal process started moving. February 8, 2010, Murray's charged with involuntary manslaughter.
He pleads not guilty.
Right. His medical license in California gets suspended. The trial itself, huge media event, it ends November 7, 2011. Guilty verdict. Involuntary manslaughter.
Sentenced to the maximum 4 years.
Yep. Though he ended up being released early October 2013, served about 2 years, citing good behavior and prison overcrowding.
And he's actually practicing medicine again now.
Seems so. As of 2023, reports said he was back practicing in Trinidad and Tobago.
Wow. Now, the legal side is fascinating because you had two big arenas, right?
You mean the criminal trial and the civil one?
Exactly. The criminal trial against Murray focused on his direct actions, his negligence. But then the Jackson family sued AEG Live.
Right, the civil suit.
And that explored these broader questions of responsibility. Was AEG negligent in hiring him? Should they have known he was, quote, unfit or incompetent? It looked at financial motives, potential conflicts of interest, a different angle.
And the family was obviously devastated. LaToya Jackson was very outspoken, saying she believed her brother was murdered for his music catalog.
A very strong claim.
Joe Jackson also filed a wrongful death suit against Murray, though he dropped that later. But that big suit was against AEG Live, filed in 2010 by Katherine Jackson and the kids, alleging negligent hiring. That trial was long, 21 weeks in 2013.
And what was the outcome there?
The verdict went in favor of AEG. The jury decided that AEG didn't have reason to know Murray would be unfit or incompetent.
So legally, AEG was cleared in that civil case.
Yes. But even with those legal outcomes, the family's belief, or at least some members, didn't change. Paris Jackson, Michael's daughter, said in 2017 she was absolutely convinced her father was murdered.
That conviction clearly runs deep for them.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Stepping back from the legal stuff, the reaction, the global reaction to his death, it was just unlike anything, wasn't it?
Truly unprecedented in many ways. It showed his incredible global reach.
And it happened so fast, TMZ actually broke the story, reported it just 18 minutes after he was pronounced dead.
Which is incredibly fast.
And the internet basically broke.
Right.
Websites just couldn't handle the traffic. TMZ itself, the LA Times, Google. Google actually thought it was under a DDoS attack at first.
The cyber attack, yeah. Because of the sheer volume of searches for Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Twitter crashed, Wikipedia slowed down, AOL Instant Messenger went down. It was wild.
The stats are pretty mind-blowing. Something like 15% of all tweets at that moment were about Jackson. 5,000 tweets per minute.
Wow.
Web traffic overall spiked like 11 to 20% above normal. It's just this perfect storm of global news hitting digital platforms all at once.
A real case study in how information spreads now.
Totally. It showed how interconnected everything had become, even back in 2009.
And it wasn't just online. Traditional media went into overdrive too. MTV, BTT, they just aired non-stop music videos. TV specials popped up everywhere, globally. Magazines like Time did commemorative issues.
But that saturation also caused some backlash, didn't it?
It did. A Pew Research survey found like 2/3 of Americans thought the coverage was excessive. The BBC got over 700 complaints. You had conservative commentators like Limbaugh and O'Reilly criticizing the focus. Even Hugo Chavez in Venezuela complained CNN was covering Jackson more than the coup in Honduras.
It raises that question, doesn't it? Where's the line between genuine public interest and maybe media oversaturation?
Yeah.
Jackson's death is such a powerful example of that tension. And it really highlights this immediate, pervasive digital news cycle that we live in it now. We take it for granted almost.
And the grief itself was so visible, so public. Fans gathered everywhere. UCLA Medical Center, Neverland, his house in Holmby Hills, the family home in Encino, the Apollo in New York, Hitsville, USA in Detroit.
Spontaneous memorials.
Yeah. Flags were at half-staff in Gary, Indiana, his hometown. Tributes came from world leaders. President Obama sent condolences, later called him one of our greatest entertainers. Nelson Mandela spoke about the global loss. Leaders in Japan, the UK.
And the artistic community responded massively, too.
Oh, hugely. Madonna did a tribute on her tour. U2 dedicated a song. Hip-hop artists like The Game, 50 Cent, LL Cool J released tribute tracks. Rock acts, too. LaToya put out a charity single.
The BA Awards dedicated a huge chunk of their show to him, right?
Wow.
Became their most watched show ever.
That's right. And internationally, Rio announced they were building a statue. Memorials in Tokyo, Bucharest, Baku, and Azerbaijan. There was even an Islamic funeral prayer held for him in Turkey.
It was truly global.
Culturally, too. The Simpsons did a tribute card, re-aired the episode he guest starred on. His movie The Wiz got a brief re-release. Janet Jackson's VMA tribute was incredibly moving. He got a posthumous Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Featured in the Oscars in memoriam.
And then there were record sales, which were just astronomical.
80-fold increase almost immediately. Amazon sold out of all his CDs and the Jackson 5s in minutes. Reportedly surpassed the demand after Elvis or John Lennon died.
Wow, breaking chart records everywhere.
All over the world, Japan, Poland, Australia, UK, Germany. In the US, his albums took the entire top 9 spots on the pop catalog chart.
The whole top 9.
The whole top 9. First artist ever to sell over 1 million downloads in 1 week. 2.6 million, actually. By the end of 2009, he was the year's best-selling artist in the US. 8.2 million albums.
And the estate generated massive revenue.
$1 billion, reportedly. Sony signed a huge deal, $250 million, for distribution rights and 7 posthumous albums. The mourning was real, but the commercial impact was undeniable.
Absolutely. The legacy continued financially and culturally.
Okay, so even with the official rulings, the trials, the conversation around his death never really stopped, did it? There are still theories floating around.
Oh, absolutely. That intense speculation that surrounded his life just sort of transferred onto his death.
Like the fake death theory. You still hear that sometimes. The idea he faked it to escape death.
Despite the very real autopsy report confirming his body.
Right. People claim to have spotted him. A border guard said he saw him cross into Mexico, usually attributed to lookalikes, but the theory persists.
Then you have the more serious murder theory, which, as you mentioned, his daughter Paris and sister LaToya have explicitly stated they believe.
Yeah.
And a lot of fans share that view. Often it connects back to the money, right?
Yeah.
Specifically his ownership of that incredibly valuable Sony ATV music catalog.
The idea he was worth more dead than alive.
Exactly. A grim thought. But it fuels that theory. And AEG Live often gets pulled into these theories too.
How so?
Well, allegations about their role in hiring Murray, the pressure for the concerts. Some theories suggest AEG was complicit or that Murray was somehow intentionally negligent, pointing to things like the CPR on the bed, the 9/11 delay, maybe even hiding evidence.
So extending blame beyond just Murray.
Right. And sometimes it goes even broader. These sort of higher-ups conspiracies, maybe people in the music industry, Sony specifically, wanted him gone to get control of the catalog or stop him becoming fully independent financially.
There were even claims he knew people wanted him dead.
You hear those whispers, and then there's the whole debate around addiction versus negligence.
Yeah, how do you frame it?
Well, the official ruling points to the drugs, involuntary manslaughter. Some sources really paint him as heavily addicted to painkillers, OxyContin, Demerol, sort of this downward spiral. But others argue no, he was desperate for sleep. He didn't truly grasp how dangerous Propofol was, thinking it was just a powerful sleep aid, not a surgical anesthetic. And they often point back to that autopsy finding.
That he was otherwise healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They use that to argue his death was purely down to Murray's negligence, or maybe even something more sinister, rather than just the inevitable outcome of addiction.
So multiple competing narratives endure.
Absolutely. And the fact these theories persist, even after investigations and trials, it really tells you something, doesn't it?
What do you think it tells us?
Well, I think it highlights our collective need, maybe, to find complete explanations for really complex, really emotional events, especially with someone so famous, so iconic.
It's hard to accept simple answers for complicated lives.
Exactly. And when there are gaps in information or things that seem inconsistent, it just fuels these alternative stories. It makes you think about the incredible burden of scrutiny these massive stars live under.
Yeah.
How even their most private struggles become public property, endlessly debated long after they're gone.
So, wrapping this up, this deep dive really shows this incredibly complex picture, doesn't it? Medical decisions, legal fights, that unbelievable global reaction, and questions that just linger.
From the cold facts of an autopsy to the raw emotion of global grief and then this swirl of conspiracy, his death left a huge mark.
It really did.
And it leaves you wondering, right? How much of his fate was maybe inevitable because of his personal struggles with health, with sleep, maybe addiction, and how much was shaped by the enormous pressures around him.
Yeah, the pressures, the decisions of others, people may be looking to profit from his talent.
It's a heavy question. What really stands out to you when you try to piece together all these layers?
For you listening, maybe this deep dive makes you think about the sheer power of celebrity, or the ethics involved in medical care under that kind of spotlight, or maybe just the incredible force of his music, his legacy. It definitely shows how a public figure's story keeps evolving, keeps being discussed, keeps impacting culture long after they're no longer here. So, the thought to leave you with, maybe, as we reflect on Michael Jackson's life and death. What does his story really teach us about that intersection? And where fame meets vulnerability, and where our own human desire to understand the mysteries around the people who shape our culture, where does that lead us?